We're back here with Jonathan Jones, talking yet again about the Saints and their letting go of head coach Dennis Allen earlier today. Jonathan, how did it all go down today, and how did it all go wrong in New Orleans, the Dennis Allen era?
They lost to the Panthers. Next question. No, I mean, like, that's really it, right? Like he survived losing in the Superdome, getting beaten pretty badly by Sean Payton on Drew Brees night, right? They survived scoring, I think, 8 points against Harbaugh and the Chargers. You can't go to Charlotte and lose to Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers.
With your quarterback coming back.
And right. You know, vibes were high this week. I reported on the NFL Today about how there was a calming sense of presence, a return to normalcy for the Saints this week with Derek Carr coming back from that oblique injury that had sidelined him for 3 weeks. They didn't get what they wanted out of Spencer Rattler. Rashid Shaheed is out for the year. Taysom Hill's coming back. Alvin Kamara with the new contract extension. Like, you're not going to make the playoffs, right? But you can beat the Carolina Panthers. And they couldn't. And that's it for Dennis Allen. You know, let's also consider this. Up until a few years ago, the host team had never played in that Super Bowl, right? And then it happened with Tampa, and then it happened with the Los Angeles Rams. Where's the Super Bowl this year? How old is that Saints roster? How did they start the first 2 weeks of the season? Like, there were a lot of thoughts of like, hey, this could be it. You know, NFC's open. Maybe it's us. And then they lose 7 straight. So, look, I know a lot of people are pulling up the salary cap table for the New Orleans Saints for 2025. And they're saying, boy, they've got to reset in 2025. They're going to have to take their medicine. It's over. And I'm just here to tell you that I don't know that people within the New Orleans Saints building feel that same way. And if you say, well, you know, you've been saying that for years. We've been saying this for a decade. And eventually they got to take their medicine. Bill Belichick is going to be on some show probably later today and say the Saints have to take their medicine. I don't think they're going to accept the medicine. Like, oh, here comes the plane, you know, with that like terrible liquid medicine. They're not going to do it. So whatever you think about like completely tearing it down and rebuilding in 25, I don't think that's going to happen in New Orleans.
What head coach, though, in their right mind would want to go to this situation?
Okay, that's a great question. Totally understand that question. And my answer to you would be there's only 32 of these jobs. There's going to be 6 to 8 that are going to be open, and everyone wants one of these jobs. And they're going to think, all right, I can save them. I'm going to get some patience, right? They're going to let me do my job. And, you know, they are either going to be right or wrong. But plenty of coaches are going to talk themselves into this job. Ben Johnson is going to be choosy. He's been choosy the last 2 years. He will continue to be. So I don't think this is the job for him. Bill Belichick, don't think this is the job for him. But after that, because I think there's 3 slam dunk head coach hires. Like, no matter what, they're going to get a job. It's Belichick, it's Ben Johnson, it's Mike Vrabel. And then after that, you have a lot of really qualified candidates who are going to get multiple interviews places, and depending on fit and how things work out, they'll get a job. But so let's look at it like a Brian Flores.
Yep.
Let's look at it with an Aaron Glenn,
yep,
right, who used to play and coach for the Saints, okay, who's also probably going to have some interest from the Jets, right, because he's a Parcells disciple as well. You're going to have a Bobby Slowick. You're going to have a Matt Nagy, right, because his Chicago tenure has aged really well, Kyle, right? The last 15 years, there's been no more successful Chicago Bears head coach than Matt Nagy.
Yep.
So, you know, again, 3 slam dunk hires and then a bunch of other guys, but I don't think you're going to see a Ben Johnson in New Orleans.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see which direction they go. I mean, you named guys on both sides of the football with offensive and defensive coaches, and obviously only less than a handful of those guys have the ability and the luxury to be choosy, as you put it, a la Ben Johnson. But the rest of these guys, to your brilliant point, there's only so many seats. You work your whole life to be able to get an opportunity to get in line, to be next in queue for this coaching cycle, this hiring cycle. You better do your damnedest to get in where you fit in, regardless of what that is, if you're not one of those guys like Ben Johnson.
I'll say this, though, about, and I don't care who they hire as head coach, they are screwed from a cap perspective now. They can try to reload all they want, but it is going to take the most amount of gymnastics that we've seen in this era of cap magic that they've done all the way dating back to the Drew Brees era, a decade plus of this, because a lot of the contracts they've pushed to the edge now, whether it's guys like Cam Jordan, whether it's guys like Alvin Kamara, where there's no more money to find to squeeze out of them. They're going to have to do everything they possibly can just to get under the cap. So anyone walking in there, it is a multi-year process to get under this cap situation that they're in. So there really is no faking it anymore. This is end of the road, unfortunately, for the New Orleans Saints. But I still don't think they blow it up. I'm with you. I don't think they end up blowing it up because of it.
And I'll just say this. You talk about cap gymnastics, the Saints are Simone Biles when it comes to that.
And she's the GOAT.
They are. But there's just... I think and I agree, I don't think they blow it up. I think they want to keep it intact, but I just don't think that there's no more putting pieces to this roster. There's no more going out and getting like they've tried to do every single year. They just got to start drafting better, quite frankly.
Yep.
They're not the only team, though, looking for some new coaches, because the Raiders made some massive changes to their offensive staff, firing OC Luke Getsy, O-line coach James Craig, and QB coach Rick Scangarello. What's next out in the desert, out for the Raiders?
Okay, let's look at how this coaching staff is constructed, all right? You had offensive coordinator Luke Getsy, who, let's be clear, was not their first choice. We know their first choice was Cliff Kingsbury, and then he dipped out when he was like, oh, I can go to the Commanders and Dan Quinn and the number 2 overall pick. All right, I'm heading over to Washington. So you get Getsy, who may become the first offensive coordinator in a while to be fired twice within a 10-month span, right? Fired in Chicago, now fired here in Vegas. You fired the quarterbacks coach. There's an assistant quarterbacks coach, Fred Walker. He's probably going to be elevated to quarterbacks coach. Okay, got that. Offensive line, Kyle, and I know that you're biased, but honest to God, I hear this from so many head coaches and head coach candidates. After your coordinators, your top hire is the offensive line coach. You put aside money for the coaching salary pool to make sure you get your offensive line coach. The Raiders didn't have an assistant offensive line coach. They had one O-line coach, and they just fired him. Now, they do have Joe Philbin, senior offensive assistant, obviously the former Miami Dolphins head coach. He cut his teeth with the offensive line. You imagine that he's probably going to make a move there. Scott Turner, the passing game coordinator, the former offensive coordinator with the Washington Commanders. Expect him to be the OC with the Raiders. And I just reported a little bit ago that Norv Turner, longtime veteran NFL head coach and coordinator, I think he is going to have some role on this Las Vegas Raiders staff. Obviously, he's been around the Raiders with his son being there. But look, this was a staff that was a hodgepodge, that was all kind of thrown together. No one really had a lot of familiarity with more than 1 or 2 other members on that offensive staff. And when you have that, and when you have bad quarterback play, because the guy who won the quarterback job, Gardner Minshew, yesterday just got benched for the 3rd time this season. And you still have 2, 3, 4 weeks until Aiden O'Connell can come back, who lost the quarterback job over the summer. As bad as it is right now, guys, honestly, I think it's probably going to get worse for the Raiders.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. It seems like they don't have a plan here. It's like they jumped out of the airplane, they pulled their parachute, but they're not going to land anywhere. They still have to land in the ocean, and there's sharks in the ocean. That's the situation they're in right now.
Is there any way Antonio Pierce survives this?
There's a way. I will say this, because you have Antonio Pierce, who the locker room loved last year, who got him the job, right? And he earned himself the job. I want to be clear about especially how they finished that season. But there has been a clear misalignment from underneath Mark Davis, from the general manager, Tom Telesco, who was brought in, to Antonio Pierce, to this coaching staff, and to this roster. So can you get it all figured out or not? That's what the second half of the season is going to be. How much say and sway is Tom Brady going to have in this is also another element, right? The new part owner of the team. And so there's still a lot left to be determined. But just like Antonio Pierce won the job in the second half of last season, he can save or not save his job in the second half of this season. I would say, just to be clear, that probably goes for a lot of folks within that building, not just the head coach.